He's going to talk about straightforward question of what remote viewing tells us about extraterrestrials and UFOs. Simeon Hine. Simeon?
Thanks a lot, Bob. Okay, great. Well, I want to cover some of the issues that we deal with in remote viewing of viewing so-called anomalous targets, because we view all sorts of different things and it raises different issues. And, a lot of people think sometimes if you just remote view something, it's going to give you all the answers you need and that's the end of it. And it's really much more complicated than that. I want to show you why. We know that remote viewing, however it actually works, our mind is like a funnel, at least our conscious mind. And as Ingo Swann pointed out a couple of years ago at one of the RV conferences, our mind takes in about 40 million bits of information a second, but only about 16 bits of that is in your conscious mind. The rest goes somewhere else. It's deleted. It's in your subconscious mind. And that's why you only perceive a very small sliver of reality when you're awake. But we know that there's a lot more, and remote viewing taps into this information that's hidden from the conscious mind by going below the level of the limit, the threshold of awareness. We can get more information than you think you have available to you by tapping into the right brain, the subconscious mind. Now, when we view, we typically use a target that we put in a folder, or we have a computer choose it, and it's not shown to the viewer ahead of time. It's called a blind target. You've seen this before, so we're not going to spend too much time on this. But we have an intended target, and then we have the viewer's session, the viewer's description. If it works well, you can see that they get a very good description of the target picture. And when we're dealing with verifiable targets that are kind of things that we've visited, places we've been to before, we know kind of what the viewer is getting and kind of sense if they're kind of on target or kind of off target. So typical targets are kind of easier to deal with because we can kind of verify if the viewer has actually gotten accurate results. But what do we do with other sorts of targets when we put our minds, our subspace minds, our remote viewing minds into off-planet targets, other sorts of places, locations, peoples, and events where we can't actually go there ourselves and get verification? Is this a face, as some people have argued, or is it just a pile of rocks? We could take remote viewers and send them there and see what results we get, theoretically, and get a sense of what actually we're looking at here. Some of us have heard Tom Van Flandern present evidence that there's something to do with the way the cameras are focused from the NASA orbiters, and it kind of makes it look different and so forth. But this is typically the type of question we want to look at when we're viewing so-called anomalous targets. Now, there are three phases of viewing anomalous targets or extraterrestrial types of information that I can perceive, and this is very basic. We have SRI and unofficial military projects from folks like Pat Price and Ingo Swann and others. And again, those are unofficial projects. They're just things that were done on their own for their own interest, from my knowledge. We have post-military civilian projects like what occurred at the Farsight Institute, which I was a participant in, which included off and on-planet extraterrestrial activity. A lot of those themes were continued from former military viewing unofficial projects that folks there had gotten interested in. And the third phase that I can perceive most recently are UFO crash retrievals, including, and there are probably more than this, Devil's Hole crash in Nevada in 1949 that some prospectors saw, and the Desert Range Experimental Station in Utah from 1953, which we'll look at in a second. So if we look at Pat Price here in the center, he was a very accurate viewer, one of the most accurate viewers that most people ever know. And in this, just to give you a sense of what he could do, at this target site from Semipalatinsk, the so-called Peanut site, he was able to view this gantry crane. And Russell Targ and Paul Smith can tell you more about this, but he was able to actually see this site that the CIA was very interested in. Now, the CIA artist had drawn this sketch here, and he was able to reproduce it. He actually said, apparently, that he was lying down and could see this big crane going over him. Then he went into a building nearby that no one had information about. And he died then later on. A few years later, apparently, an agent was able to go into that building and describe things that Pat Price had seen, which no one had seen yet. So we know he wasn't just viewing the feedback. He actually was at the target site, in a sense, and was able to walk around and get information. Now, apparently, according to the story, he was able to, one day he came in and he said that he had perceived 4 different extraterrestrial bases. I think it was to Russell, one of which was at Mount Hayes, Mount Zeal in Australia, and Zimbabwe, and a site in the Pyrenees. He said these were actually extraterrestrial bases with different functions, one of which was rest and recreation. Another of these bases was a site for training and so forth. Now, other viewers later viewed this same locations and came to different conclusions. Mel Riley did see a person at a control panel, and another viewer who I talked to said that these were correct locations, but that these were actually over-the-horizon radar installations. They were not extraterrestrial. So what are you going to do with this? We have one viewer, very good, top-notch viewer, who says that these are extraterrestrial bases. Another viewer, equally good, or perhaps in the same league, says that ththese are actually U.S. military installations. So it really doesn't resolve what they actually are, but apparently the locations are correct. Then we had some of Ingo Swan's viewings. Ingo, seen here in the center, one of the first, I would say, kind of off-planet viewing projects that I know about. He was able to view Jupiter before the Voyager mission got out there, and was able to describe features of Jupiter that had not been perceived yet, including rings. And later on, Voyager did perceive that. So it showed that remote viewing does work even at very large distances. He later wrote a book called Penetration about extraterrestrial activity on the moon, which he said he was commissioned to view for a secret intelligence agency. It's a very good book if you can get a hold of it. It's out of print. The events took place, I believe, in 1977, and he wrote the book in 1998. And in the book, he's very explicit about the fact that these individuals he dealt with, he gives them code names here like Axelrod, that this confirmed everything he had ever heard about the reality of the extraterrestrial phenomena. Now, curiously enough, for reasons I don't understand, he won't talk about this topic anymore on the radio or even at the conferences. There could be a good reason for that, but this is the last we know about his activities. Viewing the moon, he saw extraterrestrial activity. They didn't tell him this was extraterrestrial, but he was able to discern this from the types of information he was getting. Now, this could confirm what we've seen over the years in terms of pictures of what appear to be structures on the moon. Perhaps this is what he was viewing. But it's a sort of thing that you can use remote viewing to do to see if it can confirm information that you're getting from other sources. Now, my first experience with these sort of targets came at the Far Side Institute that I used to participate in. One of the first ones I did with this was a crop circle target. Now, here's one thing I want to mention, which is very important. We typically refer to these as anomaly targets. I don't think that's a good name for them. I think we should call them something like variable transition target. And the reason is, if you call it an anomaly, you're kind of front-loading the whole session with a certain intent. And when the viewer is going to view it, they're going to almost pick up the idea that it's anomalous. As you know, most of the technology around us was an anomaly at one point. It really depends where you are in the level of scientific progress. Things that are anomalies 1 year, like airplanes, are not anomalies anymore. So this is the first crop circle I viewed. Now, this is very interesting because at the time I viewed this target, I didn't know what a crop circle was. I had never heard of the term consciously. And so I did this target without any preconceptions about what crop circles were. And what I got were these individuals on the ground with a circle, kind of hills behind, and energy kind of moving in and out. And since, as some of you saw my presentation last year, I've been going to England ever since these sessions to kind of figure out what was going on here, to get my feedback, so to speak. This actually turned out to be a very accurate session. Now, as you know, I believe a lot of these large ones, like this Milk Hill formation from, Windmill Hill from 1996, a lot of these are man-made. And we've found the people who make these, we know them. I actually think I can now identify the individuals that I drew here in the P3, which is kind of astounding because I haven't had very many sessions where I actually could name the individuals in the drawing. But I think I actually know who these individuals are now. And yet here I'm doing this. It took me years to figure out what was actually going on here, and yet I can identify it. So I think this actually is a very early, correct session, very accurate data. It seems to be individuals on the ground. A lot of work went into this site. The beings are figuring something out. Focus of intention, so forth. And so that shows you can get some, even these targets that are so-called anomalous, if you spend some time doing some research, you can actually get information, and they're not so anomalous anymore. Now, there's a lot of things about crop circles we still don't understand about the energy, as I mentioned last year, battery failure, and so forth, but we do know some of the individuals that are involved in constructing them. And so this isn't really quite an anomalous target in the same way it was when I did it in 1996, I think, if you see my point.